So now we will continue with the first session of today's program, focusing on the first output of the project. So I would like to invite Senem, Yıldız, and Şebnem Yalçın to make their presentation entitled Developing the Handbook of Training Teachers of the Digital Era. So the floor is yours. Welcome again.
Thank you, Sezen. Thank you, everyone, for coming and attending this really interesting and conference. And I'd like to thank Professor Bayard for her presentation of us and her interesting talk. So yes, Şebnem and I are going to talk about, let me share my screen with you before we start.
I would like to welcome everyone, and I'll leave the floor to you. You'll lead the presentation. I'll be here if there are any questions or any comments.
Okay, perfect. So yes, Dr. Yalçın, Şebnem Yalçın, and I are faculty members from Boğaziçi University Foreign Language Education Department. And we were responsible for output one, intellectual output, which is the guidebook methodology book for this project. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we developed this STDE methodology guidebook, what we paid attention to. This is obviously a short overview of the whole guidebook, but you will be able to find much more detailed information in the guidebook itself when you get the chance to have it. Very soon. So this presentation will include information about the STDE project background and goals, although Professor Bayard has mentioned some of those. I would like to go more into detail on these. The impact of COVID-19, ICT-driven education, the role of professional development in integrating ICT into our practice, some learning theories in digital pedagogy, and strategies for effective teaching and using technology. So, according to the strategic goal set as the European Council in Lisbon in 2000, Europe's primary purpose is to achieve the most competitive and knowledge-based economy in the world. In order to achieve this goal, there should be transformation not only in economic development, but also at the educational level. So, it is well agreed that growth and well-being in a society is only possible through education. Therefore, what we need to focus on is to improve our education systems and update them to the needs of the current labor market. So World Bank identifies the 4 pillars of knowledge economy as the following: a well-educated and skilled population who can continuously adapt their skills to create, acquire, disseminate, and utilize knowledge. So knowledge is a key factor here, that we need to use it in the best way possible. And for that to be used in the best way possible, we need a well-educated and skilled population who can continuously update them, adjust them to the changing needs of the world. An effective innovation system that connects institutions, rules, and procedures that influences how businesses, research centers, and universities generate and make use of knowledge, an adequate and dynamic information and communication technologies infrastructure that allows communication, dissemination, and processing of information, and finally, a conducive economic and institutional regime that permits efficient use and creation of knowledge through policies and institutions. As you can imagine, the importance of ICT, information technologies, and digital resources is critical in developing all 4 of these pillars that are aimed by World Bank to create a knowledge-based economy and a much more developed society, at least in Europe. Furthermore, the European Parliament and the Council of European Union also agree that digital competence, along with communication in foreign languages, learning to learn, and cultural awareness and expression is a key competence for effective contribution in a knowledge society. And therefore, we also need to pay attention to developing the digital competence of all individuals in a society. One of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals is to ensure inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning as part of this whole general scheme. And lifelong learning is also the European Commission's top priority policy on education, with the policy Digital Learning and ICT in Education, noting that digital technologies are an inseparable part of today's learning process. The digital age is expanding into all areas of our lives, It isn't just those who work in IT that will need to be alert of the digital transformation. But unfortunately, as we all know, the digital skills gap is real. There's a digital divide that distinguishes the ones who have access to digital resources and those who don't. But in addition to that, even if you have access to digital resources, digital tools, and devices, there is a skills gap that is real, that is there, that we need to acknowledge. Although with the COVID-19, as I will mention pretty soon, this is getting, the gap is narrowing, but still there's a digital gap in the way that people make use of digital skills. And the Digital Education Action Plan will help Europeans, educational institutions, and systems to better adapt to life and work in increasingly digital societies. So this project supports a broad framework of activities that will renew a digital and ICT-based training methodology. This methodology aims to increase teachers' participation in digital teaching strategies, thereby support the development of digital education at European, national, and regional levels through the implementation of strategic partnerships for school education. To achieve these knowledge-based economy goals of Europe, what we did was to hold a piece of this, this problem, which is the teachers' use of digital technologies in their practices in K through 12 schools and vocational schools, and aim to train teachers to become more digitally competent in their use of technologies in their instructional practices. This is the aim of this whole project. And for this aim, our role as the Boğaziçi University team was to develop a guiding resource, a document to guide the teachers, but also teacher trainers as to how they can provide training materials for teachers to develop their digital competency. The way ICT was first employed in schools, and specifically in classrooms, was very different than today. When small computers were first introduced, the emphasis was still on the teacher-centered pedagogy, not on the learner. And the reason for that was those who could afford desktop computers were mainly few affluent institutions or households, and what they could do with the computers was limited. This obviously is changing very rapidly. But with the widespread use of the internet, classrooms around the world have started to witness a gradual change in how education is being handled. And alongside its popularity, new pedagogies for both online and blended learning have emerged, and also for technology-enhanced learning. So we're starting the third decade of the 21st century, and there's a technological gap between the rich and the poor, or the old and the young. However, despite the digital divide, both developing and the developed countries are deeply experiencing the effects of ICT on schools, teaching, and learning. As Professor Bayard has mentioned, when we first started this project, there was no COVID-19, no pandemic. So we were still experiencing quite a bit of reluctance of using or integrating technology into instruction from teachers. That was the result of lack of time from the teachers, the intensity of the curriculum that was imposed on them. So they had to finish the curriculum that's given to them, so they couldn't pay attention to, or they didn't have the luxury to allocate their time to using technology in their class, or exploring technology and using them in their classes. Or they were not very familiar with technology. They did not necessarily believe in the benefits of technology. So there were many reasons for this reluctance and resistance towards using technology in their classrooms. But what happened with the COVID-19 pandemic, I don't need to tell any of you, we've all lived through it, we've all experienced it. It has created the largest disruption of education systems in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion of learners in more than 119 countries in all continents. That's an unprecedented number. In order to guarantee the continuity of education during the pandemic, educational institutions have attempted to replace face-to-face education with technological solutions and started offering online learning experiences. So suddenly we found ourselves in the use of technology. We were all surrounded by use of technology. In the absence of technology, we were at a point where in the absence of technology, we could not actually reach our students, connect with our students, and continue our instruction with our students. So we had to make use of technology. And teaching and learning in Turkey during COVID-19 pandemic was a challenge. Obviously, it was not a very smooth experience. Ministry of Education has led us to certain resources such as EBA. There was also the Fatih project where technology was being integrated into schools. So there was some experience at that level, but still nothing was really very easy. And so it was a challenging difficulty, but at the same time, it was a catalyst for finding new approaches and innovative solutions. We cannot really say that the Ministry of Education did help tremendously. So many teachers had to find their own ways, their innovative solutions in reaching their students. Those teachers who were really wanted to continue their instruction and had the touch with their students did find different ways, did instruct themselves, did develop themselves, improve themselves, and they found ways to communicate with their students and continue their education. So that obviously had an impact on the integration of technologies into education. There was less reluctance now. There was more of a need of using technology in our classes. When we take a look at the use of technology in classes, there is a continuum, obviously. There's face-to-face education where the whole education is carried out in classroom, within the borders of the classroom, in person with the students. There's technology-enhanced instruction where the face-to-face instruction is supported and is enhanced with the use of technologies in the classroom and maybe as part of some homework. But then there is also blended learning, which is that some of the education takes place virtually or in online spaces where part of it, more of it maybe, more proportion of it is being held in face-to-face environments. Then, sorry. Okay, there's the high flex education. The high flex education is a new term. It refers to the giving education, providing education to students according to their needs. Those students who cannot be present in the classroom receive online education, whereas students who can be present in the classroom receive face-to-face education. So depending on the needs of the students, there's an adjustment and modification in delivering of the information, of the instruction. And finally, fully online, fully distance education, where we never get face-to-face or in person together with our students, but we deliver our instruction from a distance to our students. That's called distance education. And distance education, as you know, is not a new thing. It has been available around for many years, where there was also through letters, snail mail, there was still distance education. But nowadays we do it synchronously in many different platforms. What are the advantages of distance and technology enhanced education? Well, distance and hybrid models play a complementary, supportive, and enriching role in the education that is currently being done under normal conditions where face-to-face education can be done. Distance and technology-enhanced education help eliminating the barriers to effective learning, such as limited access to learning materials by the student due to the lack of class hours, the inability to every student to attend the lesson and not getting feedback from the teacher due to crowded classrooms, and the inability of classroom learning activities to appeal to every student due to the diversity of learning styles and skills in a classroom. We all experience this, that our classes are too crowded. Not all of our students have the opportunity to speak up in the classroom, to participate in the learning activities. We have very limited time, but a very overloaded curriculum. So we cannot carry out all the activities that we would like to. So we're limited with the classroom time, classroom borders. So what can we do about this? Technology helps us a lot in that sense, because we can engage our students and expose them to learning materials outside of the class, continue engaging them and exposing them to learning materials outside of the classroom, where they can collaborate with each other, interact with each other using interactive tools. I will mention those in a minute. So the features of technology, what are the advantages of technology? Why do we want to integrate technology in our classes? One important aspect is multimedia, most of you know. Multimedia is delivering a learning content in multiple formats, such as audio, text, video, pictures, interactive content, like here, as we've mentioned, the collaborative editing, gaming, blogging. Many of you I know are now integrating tools like Kahoot, Gimkit, EducaPlay, Nearpod into your classes, because these are interesting for students, because you can engage your students with the use of visuals, with the use of textual information, by asking them questions, giving them feedback, and so on. So the interactivity is also another one, that students do interact with the computer in many times when they, for example, drag and drop an item or match two items on a screen. They receive feedback, or they proceed in the activity according to their responses. So there's interaction, but there's also interactivity with other people around the world, that our students can reach a wide audience by using technology tools, like they can set up a blog page and they can be heard by a large group of people, or they can use Twitter about the latest book that they have read and still interact with other people. Or this interaction could be limited with their class members, and on a Padlet page that the teacher has set up, they can ask questions, read other people's introductions, or maybe favorite movies, or about their pets, and they can communicate and interact with people in their classroom, in their school, in their city, or people from around the world. Enhanced access to education, meaning that technology tools allow us to access or expose our students to instructional materials at any time, anywhere. So we're not limited with the classroom environment. We're not limited with the classroom materials. There is a whole ocean of information out there that the students can actually go ahead and access with the guidance of the instructor, or as part of a self-regulated instruction. There's flexibility in time and space. With many of you, I believe, would be using Padlet. With a Padlet page that you set up, students can access the activity at any time that they would like, that is appropriate for them, that's convenient for them, from home, while they are in a car driving with their parents, or waiting in line somewhere. So there is flexibility in time and space, which is very important. Students do not have to complete the activities at a given time. Individualized instruction and self-directed learning opportunities. Again, students receive feedback on their on the activities that they go through, and they can actually regulate their own learning with technology, with the use of technology. This applies to more cognitively advanced level learners, maybe more adult learners, that they can decide on their learning goals, how to achieve these goals, and use technology materials in line with these goals, sometimes with the assistance of an instructors, sometimes entirely by themselves. They can make use of these to achieve their goals. One very typical example is using well-known apps like Duolingo, like Busuu, like Memrise, to achieve their vocabulary goals, for example, for language learning, or communication goals, again, for language learning. Changing learner and teacher roles. With the technology, there is a change, obviously, in how much the teacher dominates. Teacher is not anymore the sole source of knowledge. So there's a less hierarchy in there, but teacher's role is nonetheless less than before. It is still, the teacher needs to guide the students, especially beginner level students, less advanced students, cognitively less at the very more beginner stages, the students who are at the more beginner stages, to reach necessary resources. So the teacher is the one who designs all these learning environments, and teacher is the one who integrates technology in the most educated and pedagogically appropriate way. So that takes us to a place where the importance of professional development, the importance of teachers' knowledge of technology, but also how learning best occurs, what facilitates learning in their subject matter, is critically important. With this knowledge, or merging this knowledge with technology gives us the best results. Otherwise, only technological knowledge or only content knowledge will not lead us to a very further point. I'm going to skip this, and I will come. Some of the, for example, asynchronous learning activities that students can do would be, they can watch video-based instruction, read and take notes, they can listen to podcasts, they can practice and review, but I will come back to this later. Okay, so this all takes us to a new pedagogical approaches, using technology in classes, whether it is fully online classes or hybrid classes or only technology enhanced classes, will require a new pedagogical approach, or at least an understanding. We cannot use our traditional methods that we have been using in entirely face-to-face classes in this environment anymore. Why is that the case? Because we need to realize the potential of technology, and we also need to realize the shortcomings of technology and make decisions by considering what our learning objectives are and what the advantages of that particular technology is, or what the shortcomings of that particular technology is in relation to our objectives, and make the best decision. So what we're suggesting, as always, is that we do not integrate technology for the sake of technology. We make use of technology in the classroom if they enhance our instruction, if they support our instruction, if they facilitate the instruction and help us achieve our learning objectives in a more advanced way. So there are multiple frameworks that support the teacher's development, professional development in digital competence, developing digital competence. The first one is, not the first one, let me say, but one of the most prominent ones nowadays, which is also a new one that comes out of the European Union, is the Scientific Framework for Digital Competence in Education, DigComp Edu Framework. Following our presentation, Gizem Canbulat, who just defended her master's thesis by looking at foreign language education pre-service teachers' development of DigComp Edu, digital competence, in a Turkish university program. So she's going to talk to you in more detail what that particular framework is. The reason why we emphasize this framework is because this framework is the starting point also for our project and for our guidebook. This is the framework that we used as a framework for the whole teacher training programs, the guidebook, and everything. This is a standardization. This framework is a standardization of digital competence of educators across Europe, at least. At certain levels, it breaks down the digital competence into multiple components and allows teachers assess themselves according to certain criteria and see how competent they are. And there are certain levels that are assigned to teachers, but this is a developmental process. So if you are at an intermediate level, that doesn't mean that you're going to stay there. There's always space for a teacher to develop in this framework and learn more and become more digitally competent. So what we need to do is, in our teacher education programs, we need to know in which ways we can support our pre-service teachers to become digitally more competent. Or for practicing teachers, for in-service practicing teachers, this is a wonderful way to assess their digital competence and to see where they lack information, at what levels they are stronger, or where they need more support. One thing is that, I think we're going to announce this, but we would like to give you an opportunity to assess your digital competence level at the end of this conference by giving you a questionnaire, a survey, where you can easily answer 22 multiple choice questions and a couple of open-ended questions and see what your level might be in this framework and where you need more support maybe. So this is a framework where which assesses teachers making use of digital tools and how competent they are and how competent they feel themselves is also part of this. And more information will come from Gizem. Another one, this is from Europe. This framework is from Europe, whereas this framework is a little bit older, maybe not more established, but it has been around for a while, and it's been used in many research and teacher education programs. Technological, pedagogical, content knowledge, TPAC framework. Here, teachers' knowledge levels are broken down into 3 parts, where there is the content knowledge. Say if you're a mathematics teacher, your knowledge about mathematics. If you're a biology teacher, your knowledge about biology is here. Or if you're a foreign language teacher, how well you know the grammar of the target language, the culture of the target language, sociolinguistic issues of the language, and so on, would all fall under this content knowledge. Content knowledge itself is not enough. That is why we have schools of education, faculties of education. So a person who graduates from mathematics department should not immediately become eligible to teach mathematics. We also need to give them pedagogical knowledge, how to teach that content knowledge, right? So if you're a mathematics teacher, not only you should know mathematics, but you should also have the information as to how to teach that content, how to teach mathematics to your intended audience. If you're teaching young learners, that's something else. If you're teaching adolescents, adults, students with special needs, or underprivileged students from underprivileged situations, these all require different strategies, methodologies, techniques on the part of the teacher. So this is called the pedagogical knowledge. This is where the teacher knows how to deliver the instruction in the most effective way. And finally, the third component is the technological knowledge, which is where the teachers are familiar with digital resources, tools that are available, how to make the appropriate selection of these tools. So this is actually the knowledge of the tools and resources. This is where you have all the technical knowledge. But this dark green area is where all these 3 areas do intersect. And at this intersection, teachers know for mathematics, for example, they know the mathematics, they know how to deliver this instruction. And for delivering this instruction to their students, they also know which tools work best, how they can develop the most effective digital tools, why they should integrate technology, or maybe why they should even avoid technology at this point, and how they can adapt their content into a digital platform. Okay, so this is technology. I mean, this framework suggests that a teacher should have all these three types of knowledge to become the most effective teacher using technology. Another not a framework, but maybe you're all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a way of categorizing and ordering thinking skills of people. And they are used mainly in education to develop learning objectives. For example, on this triangle, the bottom levels contain cognitive operations that are relatively easy for students, but as we go upward in this scheme, I mean in this graphic, we reach to more cognitively complex and demanding cognitive operations. So those three require higher order thinking skills, whereas those three require lower order thinking skills. So this has been used for years by educators in developing their learning objectives when they develop activities, learning resources for their students. Later on, Bloom's taxonomy has been also adapted to digital tools. And for example, it's been certain tools have been identified in relation with these cognitive levels. For example, for remembering, students can use Word for copying, pasting information, for highlighting when they're reading on a PDF file, or for searching information using a search engine. For understanding level, they can read a book or maybe read an excerpt and they can tweet about it. They can label information. For the application level, students can prepare a chart, can edit information that they read. They can upload more information. So there is this activities with digital tools, and what tools, what resources, what digital applications are appropriate for which thinking levels has been classified. There's also a tool called iPedagogy, not pedagogy, iPedagogy wheel, that also is a very comprehensive list of tools that helps teachers associate these cognitive operations with the tools. Obviously, a tool like, for example, Padlet can be used for remembering, where students only after they listen to a TED talk, for example, can write down what they heard in the talk for remembering or for understanding. But it can also be used for creating, where students do write their own reaction to a movie that they watched and write maybe a critic or I don't know, write a review of it and upload it with certain pictures, maybe some multimedia information, and that would fall under creating in that sense. So again, the teachers are the ones who should make the decision as to decide which tool can be used with which level. Okay. And one last model that I would like to talk about is SAMR model. And while integrating technology into teaching, it is significant to understand how technology helps teachers and learners to do things that could have never been done without technological tools. SAMR model is meant to provide assistance to teachers in their journey, redefining teaching and learning with technology. What does SAMR refer to? Again, this is a gradually increasing illustration, but here the top level substitution is the least complex one. Here, for example, teachers may use technology only as a substitution of traditional methods. Augmentation, now technology acts as a direct substitute, but with functional improvement. One example would be here at the substitution level, teachers make use of technology only, I mean, for example, they make use of Word documents. So students do not write down pen and paper, but they type it on Word. In here, augmentation, students receive support from Word documentation in sense that they check their their spelling, their grammar, and apply the suggestions that are made by Word. Modification technology allows for significant task redesign, and redefinition technology allows for the creation of new tasks previously inconceivable. At these levels, technology plays a more methodologically new way. You make activities, you design activities that were not available beforehand. Like even a discussion forum that you couldn't carry out outside of in the classroom, you assign your students a discussion forum, maybe with Flipgrid. They shoot their 1.5 minute video, upload it on Flipgrid, and the other students respond to each other. That's a modification, or at some point is a redefinition. So how you make use of technology in the classroom and at what level is this use is important according to Puendetura's SAMR model. Again, we give more information about this in the guidebook. There are some learning theories in digital pedagogy that are important, that we see examples of behaviorism, we see examples of cognitive constructivism, and we see examples of social constructivism. Behaviorism, as most of you know, refers to avoidance of errors. What we believe is that practice makes perfect. So there's the reinforcement to good answers. So there's practice, and imitation, copying according to behaviorism. So in line with this pedagogical underpinnings of this theory, there are a variety of technological tools that allow the learner to engage with activities based on drills and repetition with immediate feedback. These tools are especially good when students are still at the beginner level of their understanding of a content area, and to gain confidence, self-confidence in mastering content in a particular area. We use these a lot in foreign language education at the very beginner level, so that the students don't feel embarrassed when they make mistakes in pronunciation, for example, but obviously it is very limited in scope. Some tool examples for this is we can use Quizlet, Duolingo, ClassDojo, ClassCraft. Here are some examples. I mean, for Duolingo, what are your daily activities? You actually translate this into Spanish, and immediately you receive feedback from Duolingo, so that you can now imitate this correct answer, and you can get, again, feedback from the tool, from the technological tool. Cognitive constructivism is further beyond simple behavioristic activities. According to cognitive constructivism, knowledge is actively constructed by learners based on their existing cognitive and intellectual framework, what they already know. So students try to make sense out of the new information, new content in their mind by integrating this new information with their prior experiences, with their prior knowledge. And because learning is seen as an active discovery, learners are expected to monitor their own learning. Teachers, as facilitators, build on students' already existing knowledge and lead them to make appropriate modifications. There are many tools that serve this purpose. One very typical example of this is the mind mapping tools, such as MindMeister, Poplet, Mindomo. Here's an example. Here, for instance, with the emotions, students make sense out of emotions by using this mind mapping tool. The student does this individually, work on the concept of emotions, classify it into different components, and try to make sense out of it. Another one as well here is the topic health. What are the components of health, like spiritual condition, medicine, food, genes, physical state, environment? Such a mind mapping can be done after students read maybe an article, watch a documentary, watch a movie, read a book, Okay, or maybe following a discussion, they create such a mind mapping tool where they try to make sense out of the new content in their mind and make it more visible for other students and teachers. Social constructivism, on the other hand, underscores the importance of co-construction of knowledge, collaboration among learners, which is very, very promoted in today's classrooms. And technology is a great assistance in that sense, because it allows students and teachers and people from all around the world to communicate, interact, and collaborate on a single document together. Google Documents, many of you, I assume, are using Google Documents nowadays, or Padlet can be used for these reasons. And then some instructional approaches can be used under these learning theories, such as blended learning, project-based learning, experiential learning, and flipped learning. Blended learning is, as I've mentioned before, is the combination of delivering instruction in the classroom and also from a distance. This combination, or the proportions of this combination, depend on your objectives, the course requirements, and the needs of your students. But that's the reason for doing this, is to accommodate more students, to expose students to more content, to engage them also from in the outside of the classroom, not only in the classroom. So blended learning is a good way of achieving your goals and expanding your instructional methods. Flipped classroom is where students are exposed to learning materials outside of the classroom, but then they come to class and they do hands-on activities under the guidance of the teacher. So more core issues are carried out in the classroom, where students need the guidance of the teachers and the peer support that's carried out in the classroom. But theoretical information is acquired outside of the classroom according to the student's own pace. There's flexibility in time, there's flexibility in space. But the reason for this also is to expand classroom borders, both time-wise and physical space-wise, and to expose students to more hours, contact hours with the learning materials and resources. Experiential learning, on the other hand, is a good way to engage students who are in risk, especially in risk areas like health, medical students, law students. I don't know, like, for example, we mentioned, I think, air traffic workers, to simulate their learning opportunities and to learn from them. Again, technology helps us in that sense. And our guidebook presents more information. And project-based learning is where the students are looking for knowledge, is trying to build knowledge by doing certain research, carrying out certain research, collaborating with each other, taking responsibilities. They reflect on problems, issues. Usually in project-based learning, what we call ill-structured problems are used, which means that there is no clear yes or no answer, but students need to bring their own perspective, which also leads students or allows students to use higher order thinking skills and critical thinking skills in collaboration with their peers. So, but before I finish, I would like to mention that for any of the any of the technology-based activities that you design to be successful, they have to be well structured. You should include well-defined roles and responsibilities for learners, and you should encourage learners to exchange and embrace new ideas. Sorry for the repetition. So teachers' role is still very, very important. Technology has not yet replaced teachers, and it doesn't look like they will be able to replace teachers in this near future. We still have a very, very important role in designing the best and most effective learning environments for our students, and we're responsible for that. What we need to do is we need to have the necessary knowledge to be able to integrate technology, content, and pedagogy to deliver this to our students. Thank you very much. This is all we have. If there are any questions, are we taking any questions, Sezen?
We can, but I would like to add one more thing before we end. The whole information you summarize is packed in the handbook, will be published and will be available on our website, like on the project website, because this is one of the outputs. If people are interested, they can actually follow. We will be posting the handbook soon on the project website for everybody like who is interested in the information we have just provided. And we can take questions from the question for the chat or Q&A, basically. Please type your questions if you have any.
Senem Hocam, thank you very much for this enlightening presentation with full of new ideas, new and interesting ideas. So thank you very much. Actually, we have a couple of questions and lots of comments in the chat so far. Yes. Maybe I can read a couple of them to you. For example, Aydın Hocam asks, have you found any differences between the socio-economical backgrounds of the teachers who have displayed reluctance or resistance? This is the first question maybe to address to you.
That requires some research. We don't have that research. That's a good question. Do teachers who are coming from maybe economically underprivileged areas, do they have, most probably, yes, they do have less access to digital devices because there is a digital gap, and that digital gap is mainly based on economic status of people. But is there such a research that empirically documents this? I don't really know. I am sorry about that. I would assume I wouldn't assume reluctance. I would assume there is a digital gap wider in those areas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those teachers have more resistance towards using technology. Maybe even on the contrary, they may have even more desire to integrate technology into their practice, because this economic disadvantage is not only about technology, but it's also about resources, learning resources, access to learning resources. So if you cannot have access to hard copy resources, the technology gives us opportunities to access freely available resources. So they may even be making more use of technology than economically more advantaged areas. Now, my assumption.
Thank you very much, Hocam. And there is another question again from Aydın Hocam. So a related question maybe. Has where teachers teach, private versus state schools, influenced their willingness to use digital channels in their teaching?
Again, not really. That's again based on our observations, but we have in our practice teaching program at Boğaziçi University. Last year, I had the opportunity to observe schools both in private and public sectors. So one thing I observed was that our students could make use of digital technologies in a much freer and more happily in some public schools, whereas private schools were more strict about their curriculum and only made use of textbooks and didn't make use of digital technologies very effectively. That was obviously in the pandemic conditions, in COVID-19 conditions, online classes, and Gizem may actually make comments about this because she's the one who followed up pre-service teachers who completed a technology-enhanced language teaching class in their undergraduate program, and the next semester who did practice teaching in both private and state schools. And I think, Gizem, your observation also, there is no such a different, I mean, we cannot safely say that private schools are more supportive of digital technologies and they support their teachers to use those, right?
Exactly. Actually, I don't want to say names, institution names, but one of the participants in my research actually completed her practicum at a very well-known institution in Istanbul, one of the best private schools. But even in that context, she said that there were only some applications that they use, like Google Classroom, and there were some applications that the schools actually bought pro versions that they use. But other than that, also their mentor teachers actually asked help from the pre-service teachers to know more about the other digital tools, if they can actually integrate into their lessons. But other than that, they didn't allow if they didn't match certain criteria. But from my observation, I can say that there is not much of a difference. I think the difference is more about the teachers, mentor teachers themselves, than the institutions, because while some mentor teachers were found more supportive towards the use of digital technologies in macro teachings, for some mentor teachers, they strictly requested the pre-service teachers to follow the curriculum and the textbook and do not go beyond this. Only if they want to use some certain technology in their lesson, they allowed them to use this as an add-on, as a homework maybe, that they can assign students, they can do outside the classroom, or in case the pre-service teacher finishes his or her lesson before the allocated time. So I'm not sure if it's a good answer to your question, but I think it's more related to the mentor teacher's mentality and how they approach the use of digital technologies, rather than this private or state school gap. But I think I can say that the only difference between state schools and private schools I observed in my study was the access to digital devices on students' ends. I mean, for example, in state schools, the pre-service teachers mentioned that most of the students had only access to mobile phones and with limited internet data, so they couldn't use a variety of digital tools in their lessons. So they had to choose the ones that are compatible with cell phones. Whereas the one in the private institution said she didn't have such a concern, because she knew that they had access to computers, tablets, and cell phones, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, Gizem. And thank you. And Aydan Hocam, one other thing that I would like to mention based on this really good question is that I think in private schools, they made use of, they purchase cutting-edge technologies. Sometimes they make use of technologies, but they restrict the teachers to make use of them in a certain way. Whereas in maybe public schools, what teachers do is that they are the ones who have this intrinsic motivation to make use of technology, and because maybe they don't really trust the resources that they have fully, so they would like to, or not trust, but maybe they feel themselves limited in the sense that they have limited resources, so they need more. So they are more innovative in their searches, they are more innovative in their making use of technology. So they are the ones who search for what works best, how they can make them work. So while private schools teachers make use of technology, they are more in a prescribed way, whereas for other teachers, it could be a little bit more exploratory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, related to Gizem's point as well, Dr. Shuahil Sarhandi's comment I would like to read to all of you. He says, according to my research, I have found that it is not about the availability, socioeconomical barriers of teachers' institutional pressure. The biggest barrier towards integrating technology is their old mindset, teaching practices that have become the biggest barrier. Teachers do not want to change the way they teach were taught. Teachers do not really understand the changing dynamics of teaching and learning process. So he comments on that. So
excellent.
And I also would like to read one more comment from Michael Hiebler from Austria. In Austria, the gap is more between generations and change of generations in teacher education. I can see no gap here due to social background, same age. He comments. So, and there is a really live interaction in the chat. So we would like to thank all of our attendees for their comments, for their sharings in the chat.